We're on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming. We are The Blizzard, of course. My name's Marcus Speller from the reasonably popular podcast, The Football Ramble. It's lovely to be here on a Saturday night in Swansea. This is the magnificent panel that we have for your listening pleasure today. First up, we've got Philippe Auclair, biographer of... report!
I can leave now.
Yeah. Very popular man in Swansea, I hear.
Yeah.
The biographer of Thierry Henry and Eric Cantona, and a contributor to France Football magazine. Second up, we have Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan is, of course, the founder and editor of The Blizzard, contributor to The Guardian, amongst many others, Brian Clough, biographer, and the author of The Outsider, A History of Goalkeeping. And all the way on the end, we have Gabriele Marcotti. Gabriele, columnist for The Times, contributor to ESPN, and previously seen on ITV Champions League highlights. So we are indeed in good company, ladies and gentlemen. Also, I should say that this is being streamed live by Google+. We are going out to, well, I would say the nation, but it is the world, technically speaking. We're challenging Ant and Dec, certainly, for Saturday night prominence. And we're on one of the Google Hangouts, so thank you very much to Google for having us. Now, we're going to kick off proceedings with a question. Throughout, we will come to you, the audience, for questions, so have questions ready for the panel. If you don't have any now, perhaps you want to react to something they've said, or you think of something, don't let them off lightly. They are here to answer anything you have to ask them, within reason. Let's not get too personal. So please do that, and Twitter is available for your use as well. So we're going to kick off quite unashamedly by asking the panel, to get the audience on our side, who is your favourite Welsh player of all time? Philippe, I will come to you first.
Me?
Yes. Okay.
My choice is a bit odd because I never saw this player play, and it would have been a bit difficult because he died before I was born, and it's Billy Meredith. And the reason why is not just that he was truly, he was the first of the so-called Welsh wizards, and in many ways helped define what the virtues we associate with Welsh football. He won absolutely everything. Obviously, he could win with City, with United. He won the British Championship, the home championship as well with Wales. He finished his career at an incredibly late age. Something like 47 or 48.
Right, yeah.
But he was also, he was a fascinating character, and a pub landlord who was also a teetotaler. That's quite exceptional.
It's quite controversial, arguing about wages and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing.
Nice to know it happened back then as well.
That's the main reason why I would say is my favorite Welsh footballer in the greater context of football. He's a man. He was the first to work for footballers as workers, to try and make the authorities understand that footballers were workers like any others, who were also could fight for their rights. Obviously, helped create the first players' union in 1907. It didn't go down extremely well, as you might not remember. You were not alive at that time.
I don't think any of us were.
But it was a short-lived adventure, but he really changed something in the perception of footballers. And he was a man of tremendous courage on the field as well as off the field, and which is why Billy Meredith is my favourite Welsh player.
And a great moustache as well.
Great moustache, fantastic body swerve apparently.
Oh, absolutely. Jonathan, who are you going to go for?
Well, also a great body swerve. Probably slightly lower in the pantheon than Billy Meredith, but as a Sunderland fan, Colin Pascoe. Now the assistant manager of...
Oh, very popular with the front row.
Something really strange seems to have happened since he went to Liverpool, is in that his head seems to have got enormous.
What, literally or figuratively?
Literally.
Oh, okay, right. Even more interesting.
No, figuratively, I'm sure he's still a very humble man. I first started going regularly to watch Sunderland late 80s, early 90s, and in our ill-fated 1991 relegation campaign, Pascoe was one of the only real sort of creative spark. Lovely first touch, drifting in from the left. And the thing I really remember about him is one goal in particular. There was a run, I guess January, February time. We had 3 successive 1-0 home wins when it looked like we might just get out of relegation trouble. And one of them was against Chelsea, which featured the most ridiculous goal line scramble I've ever seen. They must have had 4 or 5 shots in the space of like 20 seconds, and we got it clear. And Pascoe scored this looping header that, I mean, as anybody who remembers him knows, that heading wasn't really what he was there for. But this fantastically placed looping header to win that game 1-0. But just actually giving us a bit of creativity in an otherwise incredibly miserable season.
So we've already got a Sunderland mention from Jonathan there, but it is his magazine, so you know. He's the reason why we're here. Gabriele, who are you going to go for?
Well, I was going to go for a guy I met and had the privilege of working with, the late Giorgio Chinaglia, but even though he's obviously got big Welsh connections, he's not properly Welsh. Plus, while he played here, he did live in Cardiff, and I would imagine there might be some people might not appreciate that. So I'm going to give 2 mentions. One is, I think I have to, is John Charles, who obviously was such an important figure across two footballing cultures. And if you think back to what football was like in the 1950s, it's not like today where you hop a plane, you have your Sky TV wherever you are, you get your favorite foods from home. He really was a pioneer. And while I had the privilege of meeting him towards the end of his life, prior to that, he's one of the few people who, having met so many people who knew him, nobody had ever had anything negative to say about him. And football world is a gossipy world. Everybody's got something bad to say about somebody, but he's just one of the few who just seem to be universally loved and appreciated, and a great footballer. The other one is a contemporary, and I don't think he'd mind me saying that probably wasn't a great footballer, but he's a really nice guy, I think. And I love the way he really had that sort of underdog spirit everywhere he played, and that's Ewan Roberts, which I feel bad for mentioning him in the same breath as John Charles, but hey.
I thought you were going to say Craig Bellamy for a second.
Yeah, that's actually.
Nice. Yeah, Robbie Savage, we're getting shouts from the crowd, eh? Yeah. The
Craig
blonde
Bellamy
boy, I
has
think
a
Mourinho
bit-
referred to him once. Okay, excellent. Well, I'd probably go for Vinnie Jones. Today, we were at Swansea versus Arsenal. It was the first time I'd been to the stadium. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And well, let's have a little bit of chat about the game before we talk about ownership structures in the Premier League. Philippe, you're an Arsenal fan.
Yep.
You're pleased with the result, but
Oh.
right, well, you've got an ally at least.
Yes.
Someone to protect you, perhaps, from the mob.
Yeah.
You weren't pleased with the performance.
No,
again.
no. I wasn't. I left the Liberty Stadium as with the same feeling that I had when I switched off my television after watching Arsenal win 2-0 at the Allianz Arena, a completely hollow victory. I genuinely had the feeling that it was a Swansea team which has achieved already far more than it could ever hope for this season. The trophies in the cabinet, qualification for Europe is ensured. Obviously, survival is not even a question, and they seem to be in demob mode. And I didn't see much in Arsenal's performance today that suggested that any corner had been turned. Exactly the same thing as in Munich the other day. And I know that sounds like a terrible, typical, actually, Gooner talk, where everything is always, everybody is always complaining about something. They're the whingiest whingers in the whole football universe. But I didn't see anything today apart, Santi Cazorla was very good indeed. But again, there was a lack of fluidity, there was a lack of tempo, there was a lack of imagination. And also you could see clearly that it's a team, when it hasn't got the ball, doesn't know quite what to do, which is one of the biggest problems that Arsenal has got. So it's not a victory that has put me in any particularly good mood, even if in the context of what's going to happen in the Premier League. It's a very, very important 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. Wins, Brian Clough once said. Let's go to
transition to Jonathan, obviously.
Indeed. Well, Jonathan, actually, we'll talk about ownership structures. It's interesting that Swansea and Arsenal playing each other. Swansea have been, held up as this example, the great example of a club which has the fans share system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I'm not saying anything that people here don't already know, but they're clearly a model for any club. I mean, to go in a decade from virtually being bankrupt to being in the Europa League is an extraordinary achievement. And I think just the good sense of the board and fans, obviously, their representation on the board, determining a philosophy and sticking to it, and appointing managers who follow that philosophy. It just saves money. It just makes sense. And I think one of the problems English football has, or one of the problems the Premier League has, is this idea that the manager has to be all powerful. It's this very old-fashioned idea of the manager, and I think it is just wasteful. You have to be. The football clubs are too big now to be run by one man. You can't have one man controlling everything. And the change in managers, the throughput of managers, if you keep changing a manager every 18 months and half a dozen players leave and you have to bring another half dozen players, a new manager has a new philosophy, he wants his own people there. It's just an enormous waste of money. You never get continuity. And there's people like, if you look at most of the great managers, Look at Don Revie when he went to Leeds. Look at Clough when he went to Derby. Look at Clough when he went to Forest. Look at Ferguson at Manchester United. Look at Chapman at Arsenal. It took them all 2 or 3 years to get a structure in place. A lot of managers never get that time now. Now I know Gab is a good, you love slaughtering managers. You love kind of them to be sacked every 3 months.
I'd say I don't. I believe that the cult of the manager is damaging to football in general, and in that sense, I would definitely agree with Jonathan. But the way I see it is there are some managers who are basically con men, and there's a lot of people. We in the media collude with it. The fact that we even use this term, will the board back the manager? What does back the manager mean? It means give the guy money so he can get rid of the players who are there and then bring in a whole load of new players, often dealing with agents who might be somewhat dubious, as sometimes happens. You guys have had what, 4 managers here in the last 9 years, something like that, and the club has done well. It's because it's a well-run club. Because the manager, and I put chances to spend a little bit of time with Michael Laudrup, and I know Roberto Martinez fairly well. They can just focus on the team. A manager's job should be first and foremost to coach the team, to make the players better. When a manager changes, the first question the club should be asking is, what are you going to do differently than the previous guy to make the guys who are here better? How can you use the resources we already have better? And then we'll go and talk about bringing in other people. Any moron can go and bring in 10 players that he likes and start from scratch. But the guy who loses, or the people who lose from that, are the fans and the club. So that's kind of my take. And I think, I agree definitely with the principle of fan share in general. I think, though, along with it, you need good people who are competent, who know how to run the club. Because there's obviously a lot of examples where, fans have run clubs, and I still think it's more desirable, but where it hasn't worked out. And so, I think you guys need to cherish the people who are here. As long as they're doing a good job, when they start doing a bad job, get on their behinds. But I think that's absolutely crucial.
Philippe, you're itching to comment on that.
Because I think it's quite a remarkable coincidence, or it's a happy coincidence that today we saw Arsenal play Swansea, because two of the clubs which are supposed to be beacons of wisdom for the rest of the Premier League. But what you can see is that Swansea is a very good example of what is going wrong at Arsenal Football Club. And you're talking about the manager. Well, you're talking about the manager and the fact the manager is given too much power, and he's not a coach. And in the case of Arsene Wenger, he's not a coach either. He thinks he's a coach, but he's not. But you also have the parallel between.
Very happy fan over there.
Yeah, the very happy fan.
Yeah,
you also have you have a parallel as well in the ownership model, where you genuinely have in Swansea people who are part of the trust and who have a say in the running of the club, and then you've got this Mickey Mouse attempt of doing it at Arsenal, which is the fan share. Which honestly had got the support of a number of people within Arsenal, but certainly hasn't got the support of the main shareholder, i.e. Stan Kroenke, which means it's a pretty hollow gesture, which is meant to pacify supporters who are worried about the future and the soul of their club. So it's not all what it seems. When you say the 2 best run clubs in the country, that might have been true a couple of years ago, but now it has shifted definitely one way, and that's Swansea's way, certainly not Arsenal's.
It was quite amusing hearing the Swansea fans today singing at the Arsenal fans, "You're going to win all this season." So, quite good. We're going to go to Twitter. Gareth, have you got a Twitter question for us over there? Here comes the microphone. There you go, sir. Are we on? Yes,
Yes.
I think we are.
I think that's a yes.
He's wearing Velcro by the sounds of it.
What's your favourite footballing guilty pleasure?
Favourite footballing guilty pleasure? It's a good question. So maybe, I don't know, a dirty tackle or something like that. The thing that journalists should be into. Gabriele.
Well, you want to think? Do you want to think?
No, I can.
Okay.
Have you got one?
I've never heard you pause before.
Yeah.
I was
No, I was just thinking of what it could.
Is it Serie A?
My favorite.
It is.
No, my favorite guilty pleasure is actually seeing footballers who aren't good. I remember I was watching on ESPN. We have a show called Talk on Terrace, and we had this chap on named Barney Renee, who's very funny, writes for the Guardian. And he was on with Danny Mills. And Danny Mills was going on about how he's offended by, first and foremost, by diving and waving imaginary yellow cards. And that was the most offensive thing in the world. And Barney says, like, you know what? That doesn't offend me anywhere near as much as players who are professionals, who are supposed to train and do this for a living, and they can't trap the ball, they can't pass the ball, and they basically can't play football. And he looked at Danny Mills straight in the eye. And it's crap like that, which I actually find, like, once I've worked with Danny, I like Danny, but once in a while, it's good to have somebody like Barney, who's sort of read thin and kind of wussy, and he's a Guardian guy after all, and to have him go and sort of face down the dragon, and I enjoy that.
Oh. Might I remind you, Danny Mills was a part of Sven's mastermind that kept a clean sheet in the 2002 World Cup against Argentina.
It's because Gary Neville was injured.
Well, it still had to be done. Jonathan.
I think just brawls. I like a good brawl.
Right, as you can tell.
Yeah. I don't like being involved in them. That's not going to be the idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're out in Swansea tonight, so be sure to...
No, but, you commentators, we like to see that kind of thing. Everybody loves to see it. Not every game, but every now and again to see, 5 or 6 players we've seen piling in, haymakers being thrown. One of the great joys of the Copa Libertadores, one of the real shames, I don't know if you remember the final last year when Boca produced a very limp performance against Corinthians, and Riquelme did his weird semi-retirement thing that got rid of Falcione afterwards. But actually, the worst thing about that game was there was no brawl at the end. And it's a tradition,
Yeah.
Before you've sent the trophy, you have a fight. And then that wasn't there. And I think that the tournament lacked something as a result. In my mind, people go, Corinthians, brilliant. The first ever time they won the Libertadores. There's an asterisk there for me. No brawl.
Okay.
So if I can just jump in on the subject of brawls, I will be tweeting this out later if there are other, for Jonathan's benefit, if there are other people who enjoy brawls. But I think the single greatest was a brawl in Serie B. There was a goalkeeper named Soviero, Soviero. You can go to YouTube, not now, but later, and check it out, who just goes absolutely demented and takes on the entire bench of the other team. It's like watching a Ramble film. You got like 10 guys running at him, and he just bounce off him, and he's just wailing on everybody.
It's the Temuri Ketsbaya kind of moment.
Yes, except it's real live people and not just the horn.
Okay.
So we're 20 minutes in with some esteemed journalists, and we're talking about fighting. Great stuff. So people who can't play football and fighting, often the two are linked, incidentally. Philippe, we're going to slightly change the subject here, although perhaps it's fitting. For guilty pleasures. You met Sepp Blatter recently.
Yeah.
And you interviewed him, and booing already.
Booing already.
Yeah. How did that go? You were in the belly of the beast, which is in the FIFA.
Yeah, I was in Mordor, and and I met with Sauron, and I survived.
Yeah.
And got the ring here.
That's right.
And no, it's a little bit odd. I must say that probably like most people, perhaps like most people in this room, my opinion and my appraisal of Sepp Blatter a few years ago was not perhaps the best, in as I thought that this man was, it made me feel so angry. And it's very strange. It's perhaps the Stockholm syndrome, but when you start spending a little bit more time with the people who are trying to run the game or running the game, you realize that actually things are not quite as clear-cut as they seem. And when Sepp Blatter accepted to receive the Blizzard in November last year, so I went to Zurich and to the FIFA headquarters, which is a really, really weird place. I mean, when you arrive there, when you open the doors, first of all, you can hardly see the person with the reception. It's a bit like being, do you remember that shot in Brazil when he arrives at the Ministry of something or other? And this person is so far back. It's a bit like that. And then also to go up
in the all-glass building.
In the all-glass building, you're accompanied with
transparency.
somebody and who you don't have a pass. His fingerprint scans,
Right.
and then you're in the the inner sanctum of Sepp Blatter's office.
Did they have your prints on file there?
They have now.
Right. Okay. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
I don't know. I was just asking myself a question. And then you sit down and you realize you have a cup of coffee and you realize that the guy is obviously incredibly intelligent, incredibly quick in terms of thought, and incredibly charming, and far more candid as a politician, only a politician can be.
Yeah.
Quite a superb interviewee, I must say. And what really is interesting to me is that we did the interview for the Blizzard back in November, but that you might have read, a few dispatches in the press here and there. There's a lot happening around FIFA at the moment, and the World Cup, the Winter World Switch, the Switch. Michael Garcia, FIFA Exco members being, in danger of being excommunicated, so to speak. That's pretty good.
I like that.
It's okay.
Thank you very much.
But the fact is that it's obvious that Sepp Blatter at the time was already in the phase of thought that he wanted things to move, and that's really the idea I got and the feeling I got. And I'm now convinced that those who present those issues again as FIFA's all bad and it needs to be uprooted completely might not possibly have the clearest view of what is really happening in Zurich and elsewhere in world football. Far more complicated than that. But a charming and fascinating man.
Extraordinary. Didn't think you'd hear that tonight, did you?
No, I didn't. I never thought I would ever say that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to come to you very, very shortly.
If you have questions, by the way, or you want to challenge what he just said about Blatter, please
Yeah,
feel free to
if
let the record reflect.
let's
fine and charming or
questions.
pleasant.
Wait for the microphone. It is just coming. Here it comes now. Okay, we've got a challenge straight away. Oh, is the mic on? Flick it on at the bottom.
Just picking up on FIFA.
Yeah.
Qatar, I mean, how can that possibly happen? Because, I mean, it's going to go to the winter, and I mean, it's just, I don't know how it's happened.
You say it's going to go to the winter. Interestingly enough, in the Blizzard interview, Sepp Blatter was adamant that the tender was for June and July. He's repeated this since then. He's done a couple of interviews very recently in which he said that the Qataris would have to go to the FIFA Exco executive committee to get the date changed. There was also, if you believe in coincidences, I personally don't, the chief medical officer of FIFA who wrote part of the technical report for the 2022 World Cup, Mr. Dog, D apostrophe HOOGHE, who repeated that it was an insane idea basically to hold a World Cup in the summer. So when you put the two together, you're wondering there's a problem there. There's a contradiction. And this contradiction is at the heart of all that is happening at the moment within the world governing body and what is happening in the corridors of Mordor and many other places. It's basically the biggest question that is facing world football at the moment. I mean, you would say match fixing and this are the two biggest questions facing world football. At the moment, it looks a little bit complicated, would you say, Gab?
It is complicated. Just on the issue of Qatar, and to be fair to Blatter, he wasn't in favor of the World Cup in Blatter, in Qatar. He made it very, very clear. Part of the reason, just to bring Blatter down, at least from my perspective, the problem I have, apart from the fact that he's been in charge for about 1 million years, and that on his watch there have been enormous scandals, and on his watch you've had you've had certainly two situations where you had 4 FIFA vice presidents stand against him and saying this guy has to go out, and he's managed to survive all that. And some very good people as well have very clearly gone against him. He employs people who have been found guilty of paying bribes to MasterCard. I think it's a matter of public record. And then after they go away, then they come back into the organization. I appreciate it's a very political organization, but if you have the power to get reelected so many times, you also have the power to reform it. And I don't think the man uses FIFA as a vehicle for personal enrichment the way some people do. I don't believe that for 1 minute. But I also think he, perhaps because he doesn't trust other people as much as he trusts himself, he has created a climate which basically leads to one solution every time there's a FIFA Congress, and that is for Blatter to keep getting reelected time and time again.
Jonathan, you've covered many a tournament before. Would you look forward to Qatar 2022? Because it's a very small country. There's a lot of money going to be thrown around for that tournament. It'll almost be turned into a World Cup theme park in a sense. Well, there's short distances to travel. Yeah. The weather will be hot.
Well, I hate hot weather.
Right, okay.
I'm from Sunderland.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there are, I could sit here all night listing reasons why it's a bad idea. The one good thing about it, and the one thing that goes against recent tournaments, and certainly the tournaments we're going to have in Brazil and in Russia, is, as you say, the distances are very small. It's going to be very easy to get around.
Not mentioning the 2020 Euro.
Well, but I mean, the 2020 Euro is actually, although I think it's a very bad thing, I think it is the logical endpoint of where we've gone. That anybody who's in Poland, Ukraine last summer, and God knows you drove me around.
Yes. Many hours in the car with
those journeys. You cannot believe how bad that was. No offense, but if you're having to travel, 7-8 hours to get from one stadium to the next, then why not have it in different countries? I mean, what Platini said, that it's easier to get from London to Paris than it is to get from Cardiff to Gdansk, or it's just not Cardiff to Gdansk, from Gdansk to Warsaw, is clearly, it's just true. It is easier. It's it's an hour on a plane. There's many planes. It's not expensive. It's not that expensive.
It will be.
Not compared to internal flights in Ukraine.
If you book ahead.
But I think, on top of that, there's another basic issue, is that if you're a small country, either you're lucky enough that God deposited all these extremely wealthy or extremely lucrative natural resources underground, and that you happen to be part of a royal family who rules by right, and you're an absolute monarchy, and you get to take all that and kind of buy a World Cup. The reality is most small countries, and we're in one right now, aren't like that. And the simple truth of the matter is this obsession with the World Cup must be in just one nation means that most of the world will never, ever get to host the World Cup. You guys, I'm assuming there's a lot of Wales fans here. Unless you qualify for the World Cup, you will never get a sniff of a World Cup. And I think that's wrong, because there's 209 FIFA member nations, and only about 20-25 of them can host a World Cup. If we insist on this, no sharing thing, I think that's unfair. I like the 2020 plan personally. I would like to see football spread around. I think it's not just the domain of big countries. If we want to have the perfect
fact of life, Gab, you can't stage it. It's a fact of life.
Well,
it's like being small or tall or fat or thin. You're too small to host a World Cup. End of story.
You can host games within a World Cup, which I see no valid reason why that can't be the case, because the alternative is you get all these intermediate countries like South Africa who go, and to show that they've got 10 big stadiums, they go and they spend all this money to build a bunch of white elephant grounds, which will never be used again. I think Africa was a perfect example where you could have spread it to some neighboring nations that maybe already had a stadium, or could have built a stadium that they would have actually used again, rather than taking all this public money, often from countries who really don't have that much public money, just so that we can say, oh, look, we're having it all in one place.
Well, I think you've got to ask, why were tournaments, why was it seen as a good idea to have them in one country? And the logic to that is, I think you try to make it a festival. You try to make it an event where players, fans, journalists, scouts, coaches, everybody came together. There's this great transfer of knowledge that you could get from one round to the next very easily. So you could see lots of matches. So you could experience lots of different footballing cultures all in the same place at the same time. And if you think back to the Euros in the 70s when you had home and away knockouts up to the semi-finals, and the last 4 teams went to one place to play the semi-finals and the final. The reason that was expanded was to create this sort of festival environment. Now that's gone; it's not there anymore because distances between Kiev and Kharkiv or Donetsk
and also
Poznan,
it's also expensive, and most people who have jobs and aren't independently wealthy can't afford to take 4 weeks off to go and attend a tournament. I mean, sometimes I know you're a big cricket fan. I catch cricket on TV.
How did the Irish manage it, though?
How do the Irish manage? Because they get knocked out in the first round.
Okay. Well, it's a debate that will rage on, but we've got to go to some questions from the audience. Who's got one? Yes, man with his hand up over there. Here's the microphone. It's nearly on.
Hi.
There we go.
I've actually got 3 questions.
3 questions. Let's have one of them.
They're all intertwined.
Okay.
Right.
Does the panel agree that the Premier League is actually 2 leagues with probably 6 or 7 of the top teams in the top bit and Swansea City and the rest in the bottom bit?
Right.
The second question is this good for English and Welsh football? And the third question is, if you agree with me, how do we resolve that issue?
Okay, so is the Premier League in 2 leagues, Jonathan?
Yes, I mean, no question that's the case. You just have to look at the table, and maybe if you look at it in 1 year, you'll have the team who wins with 90 points, the team who's bottom with 30 points, and a relatively even spread. But it's certainly if you accumulate those points values over 5 or 10 years, you will see a clear gulf, and probably even more than 2 leagues. Probably have 2 or 3 teams at the top, then 3 or 4, and then a big wedge, and then maybe 2 or 3 at the bottom. So yes, absolutely. Is it a good thing? No, it's not. Can we do anything to resolve it? Not in the present financial climate. No. The way money works in football now is it is filtered towards the top. What I would say, however, is that the Premier League is less bad than most places. If you think in the last 9 years, we've had 8 different teams that contested the Champions League final. Of whom 4 have been English. Only one other country has more than one, and they only had 2 teams. So the fact there is that depth, the fact there is the possibility of 3 or 4 teams challenging, is relatively healthy. It's not a great situation, but it's a lot better than other places. And people hold up Germany as a great example in terms of lots of teams can challenge. Oh, actually, the truth is in Germany, it's a different type of non-competitiveness. You have Bayern and you have the rest. And if Bayern don't play well, sure, there's a 6 or 7 other teams can step in, but if Bayern play well, they win the title by however many points are clear this year, 15 points or whatever it is at the minute. So 20 points, yeah. Something like that. And I think that's. I mean, I guess you look at this season when so many championships, Spanish league's decided, Italian league is pretty much decided, Premier League is decided, Bundesliga is decided. That's a concern. If that's the way we're going, that these super clubs will keep dominating, and then the Champions League is the only real challenge. That is a big worry. So yes, I think it is a concern, but I don't think the Premier League is the worst example of it.
Philippe? Yeah, and one of the things which is also an area of concern, because the solution to that, what I would call almost a fossilization of the elite all through the major leagues in European football, the only remedy to that is for breaking up every single financial fair play rule that you can think of. And that's an argument that was put to us. We went to visit Angie Makashkala, and the guys were saying, do you really want a European football that's going to be dominated by the same 8 teams for the next 50 years? Or do you want for some guys to come in and actually shake up that order? And the only way we can do that, we need to spend a lot of money to get those clubs going. And I have to say the argument might sound immoral from a distance, but when you think about it, it has a lot of rationality and logic behind it, and which is the only way perhaps the old order can be shaken, because it's absolutely true. It's the same throughout Europe, with the exception of France, where it's only a matter of time before PSG find their feet and carry on and dominate the championship forever.
I mean, I guess there's a slight contradiction here that we're saying Swansea are a great model for everybody, a great example. But I guess the question is, how far can Swansea go with this model without suddenly kind of vast amounts of investment? And I think it's such a slow incremental process. Maybe if Swansea keep going like this for 20 or 30 years, yes, they can challenge, but it is going to take that long without one owner coming and pumping in £500 million.
I think we just jumped around the issue, but I mean, Philippe mentioned it there. Actually, financial fair play simply fossilizes this situation. It sounds great, fair play, like stability, blah blah blah, but all it does is that those clubs who, by an accident of geography or because of like Bayern Munich, they're a big club in one of the wealthiest areas in Europe where there's lots of big corporations. I don't know how many people know this, but Bayern Munich's commercial income from sponsorship is slightly less than Liverpool and Manchester United combined. Now, think of turning on Sky and like, oh, the global brand of the Premier League, the Asian markets, blah, blah, blah. And United are pretty good at selling things. Liverpool, a little bit less so. But put the two together, they barely equal Bayern Munich.
1.6 million last year.
I think, that is a situation we're in. All that said, I think we need to ask ourselves, why do we love football? Why do we support our team? Do we support our team because we want our team to win the Premier League? Francesco Totti, who will soon become the second leading goal scorer in the history of Serie A. I remember Graham Souness on TV saying, well, he couldn't be that good because he never played for a big club. And I don't like Souness. I don't care if he's watching this. The reality is, actually, Graham, first and foremost, I'd love it if Matt Letizia or somebody like that came to you, or Alan Shearer, who only won, one league title in his career, came to you and said, why don't you say it to my face, this business with show us your medals. But he said the title he won at Roma would have been worth 10 titles at Juventus or at Real Madrid. And I think that's the reality. I don't, you look in the lower divisions, the attendances are as high in this country as they've been at any time since the early 1970s. And it's because people appreciate what it means supporting their local club. They appreciate the sense of community. They appreciate the excitement. They appreciate being there, even if they don't go and get to play in the Champions League, or even if they don't go and win the Premier League. And I think, that's a positive thing. And I think a lot of football fans live football that way.
That is, we'll come to you in the second half, my good man. That is the end of the first half. We're going to go for a quick break, but do have some questions for the panel for when we come back, because we'll get stuck into yourselves, so to speak, in the second half. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Just so I can
So we've had the half-time oranges.
Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back for the second half of the Blizzard Q&A. Hello to all the people tuning in Google Plus, the Hangout. Good to have you here with us as well. Now, we're going to kick off with some goalkeeper chat. Gents, a favourite moment involving a goalkeeper from the world of football? Gab.
Could mention that Gigi Buffon leading the penalty shootout against France for in the final of the 2006 World Cup. But I don't want to upset Philippe, so I won't talk about that. I will talk about instead about the greatest football team I have ever seen in the, well, not in the flesh, but in my lifetime. Although Spain might challenge them. That's Brazil 1982, one of the most dramatic games ever. Italy against Brazil, which finished 3-2, and Dino Zoff at the venerable age of 40, pulling off an incredible save off a header in the dying minutes, in injury time, in fact, if memory serves. From Oscar, that's right.
Is this a history of Italy's World Cup wins?
Hey, I know it's difficult for you to relate because y'all have won butt kiss in your lifetime, but hey.
Well, we've got some Le Tournois chat coming up, so don't worry about that. Jonathan.
Well, if Gab's going to have two, I'll mention two. The first one, Kennedy Mwina, the Zambia goalkeeper, scoring his penalty in the shootouts for Zambia against Ivory Coast in the Cup of Nations final in 2012.
Great stuff. Which
was an incredibly emotional occasion. Zambia back in Libreville, 19 years after the crash, wiped out the great Zambian team. For them to win it in that stadium, the most moving thing I've ever witnessed live in terms of sport. So it's Kennedy Mwina scoring that penalty and then saving the penalty from Colature and Gervinho missing, obviously. In fact, I feel very privileged. In the last 24 hours, I've seen Michael John Obi having a shot on target and Jovino scoring. But then the other one, to be incredibly self-indulgent, wasn't alive at the time, unfortunately, but Jim Montgomery's brilliant double save in the 73 Cup final. I'm sure you do know it, but just in case you don't, let me talk you through it.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, it is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Deep cross comes in from the right. Cherry coming in, header. Montgomery dives to his left. It's a good save anyway, pushes it away, comes straight to Peter Lorimer, 8 yards out. The whole goal train, that for some reason decides to side foot it, and that gives Montgomery the time to thrust his arm up, and the ball comes off just beside his elbow, cannons up on the bar. And it's such an incredible save that if you see the commentary that Jimmy Hill's doing, which I think was the BBC commentary, he just can't believe it's been saved, and he has to see a third replay before he accepts the ball's been saved. He actually says, it looked as though the ball hit the staunch at the back of the goal and came out again. This could be very vital. And he sees it again and says, oh, it's an incredible miss. And then only the third time can he actually... It's like St. Peter and kind of denying Christ.
St. Thomas, I think.
No, St. Peter.
St. Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah. That's a blow to French Catholicism.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not at all.
We won't be fielding any questions about Catholicism, just incidentally, before anybody dares to suggest. Philippe.
2 words. Jimmy Glass.
Ah, yes, Carlisle United. Very popular.
That's pretty good. And 2 other words, which mean a lot to a Frenchman. Actually, just one is enough, because it's become a common noun used by French people when they talk about a keeper who makes a big mistake. It's called une arconada. 1984 Euro final, Platini's free kick, and Arconada letting the ball. So it's terrible to say that favorite moments about a goalkeeper when it's absolutely horrible mistake.
Actually, the extraordinary thing about Arconada, which I'm not sure how well known this is, but when Spain won the last Euros, and Platini is there presenting the medals, there's one of Spain's basketball, it might have been Xabi Alonso, I'm not absolutely certain, was wearing Arconada's shirt from the '84 final, and when he collected his medal from Platini, wearing that shirt to try and restore Arconada's reputation.
Oh, how about that? Right, we've had some comments from the Google Hangout, haven't we, Gareth? And is the mic on?
I think so.
Yeah, there it is. There we are. We're on. Fire away, good sir.
Which idiot organised this on the night of the Six Nations?
He's over there somewhere. Next one. Hopefully of a better calibre.
Mark Welsh says, why is Gab so serious?
Why is Gab so serious? Jonathan?
I think when he has natural comedians on the stage, he feels the need to play the straight man.
Damn straight.
Good man. And do we have anything else from Twitter, perhaps?
Yes. Given the news of Tony Gubba's death in the last week, who is the panel's favourite commentator or journalist, if they want to go journalist route?
Gab.
As far as commentators are concerned, I'm going to go with 2, and they're my good friends. They're Dave Farrer and Jim Proudfoot. I'm one of those people who, because I think I'm a know-it-all, always picks up on the commentators' mistakes, always gets riled when they say things. People I hate more than commentators are co-commentators, but having done a little bit of myself, having met a lot of these guys, a lot of these people really are very, very knowledgeable, and it's an extremely difficult thing to do. So when it's on, I make it angry, and then afterwards, I recognize that they're actually pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Some.
So I was just thrown to think of. I did a bit of co-commentary during the 2008 Cup of Nations, and before the opening game, the first time I'd ever done it was Ghana v Guinea. I'd done all my research and I'd learned about the players, and I had reams and reams to say about the Ghanaian players, the Guinean players. I'm sitting there and going through it again. The producer suddenly says, "What are you doing down here? On, sir? Do you mean it's like 2 hours till kickoff?" Well, no, you're doing the opening ceremony. What? And so I had 10 minutes to go through a wedge of notes that fat in French, and I don't speak French. And it was hideous. It was. I'd never heard it. And I don't really want to hear it, but. It was 4 of us, and none of us knew we were going to be doing the opening ceremony. We were literally passing these notes on, just taking it in turns. So there's 2 French guys, and then the 2 of us doing it in English. And I thought, the only way to get through this is to give it the full Barry Davis, who is my favourite commentator. I think Marcus's favourite commentator. I think any right-thinking person's favourite commentator. And so you find yourself kind of taking on the Barry Davis inflection, and there they are. coming from the north end of the arena, the four horsemen. How appropriate they come from the north, as horses came to this proud country from the north, from Burkina Faso, in the late 14th century. And yeah, so I have huge respect for the way Barry did opening songs. The first time I met him, sorry, I'm rambling on here, but unfortunately he was quite drunk. It was at a book launch. And I thought it'd be a great idea to do Barry Davis impressions at Barry Davis. It isn't.
No.
When will they learn?
They won't learn. My favourite Barry Davis moment, and I'm going to chip in here if I may. It's World Cup '94, Germany versus Belgium. Rudi Voller and Jurgen Klinsmann dancing through the Belgian defence, scored 2 goals in the first 7 minutes. And Barry said, "It's an early kick-off here, and some of the defenders are still having breakfast." Absolutely glorious. Philippe, you've got a story to tell.
Well, I mean, I would have made the same choice as Jonathan, so I don't have much to say apart from the fact that I fully understood the difficulty of the job of commentating very early on. I was on a satellite French TV channel called TV Sport, and I did the Copa America in 1991.
Is that a sports channel?
It was a sports channel. Thank you very much, Gab. And of course, you can imagine in those days it was done from a cubicle somewhere in Soho. We had no team sheets, absolutely nothing, or we thought we had. And my first game was Chile-Venezuela, and I really researched it pretty hard. The only problem I had is that whoever had helped me doing the research had got the jerseys confused, and I had been given the wrong ones. So for the first 6 or 7 minutes, I thought, this is really strange. Venezuela are playing rather better than I expected. Until one of my co-commentators said, I'm going to take this on. And saved me from utter embarrassment. So, but I would go for Barry Davis.
Barry Davis is the right answer to that one. We're going to go to the audience. The man in the blue top right there, I believe you had a question. Here comes the microphone. And let's see what he's got to offer. Are we on? Is the mic working? We've got another mic. Okay, I'll come over there myself if I have to. It's all about turning on at the bottom. Please.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay,
there we go.
Yeah, it's kind of getting back to the point we were at before we went for the break. Do you think that the removal of seeding from the Champions League would make for a better competition and would benefit more teams in the competition?
Okay. Gab, would you like to have a go at that one?
I see the logic with it. I don't actually think it would. On the face of it, you might think so. This way, we get a greater turnover of teams, and you get teams going on good runs, winning the competition. In reality, what would happen, and this is the harsh business reality of it, is that broadcasters would find it less valuable, and they would put less money into the central pot. Now, you might say, and I'm guessing you're an Ipswich Town fan, what do I care if the Glazers get less money out of it? You'd be perfectly justified. The problem is the Champions League makes a huge difference a lot of times to smaller clubs from I guess, relatively bigger clubs from smaller nations who can get into the Champions League, get their sort of 6 group games, and then really stabilize their club for several years to come, and then that money trickles back down. Whether it's we've seen in recent years with Sparta Prague, we've seen Porto in a slightly different way. We've seen Bate Borisov. You would be losing some of that if you didn't do it. The other thing is the Champions League is such a broad thing. I'm assuming all you guys are probably mostly pretty hardcore football fans who go to football regularly. The Champions League also caters to a lot of casual fans, and casual fans generally like to see the bigger, better teams with the better players go through. So I think there's also an element of fairness in the seedings.
Another question from the audience. We had a hand up. There it is. The microphone will be with you in just a moment.
Hi there. Picking up on Gab's point earlier about the greatest team of his lifetime was Brazil in '82.
Right.
Just wondering on some of the other pundits. I mean, you had the great Holland team in the '70s, France in '86 maybe. Even some people say even England in 1990. And for Jonathan,
that's very generous of you.
Even
God bless you all the same.
Jonathan also you had the Yugoslavia team of '92, which never got to qualify, and the recent and the recent Ivory Coast team that never won the Cup of Nations. So just who the greatest team never to fulfill their potential.
Jonathan.
Well, Yugoslavia team, it's one of those.
He really pushed your button with that, didn't he?
Yeah, well, it is one of those lovely ideas. What a great team that could have been. If you think of basically the Croatia side that won the World Youth Cup in Chile in 1987, and then the bulk of that go on to be the team that finished third in the World Cup in 1998. You think of them plus Savicevic, plus Stojkovic, plus Boban. Boban obviously was part of it. With Qatar nets, you think, that would have been a great side. And yet, actually, Yugoslavia had a team, maybe not quite to that level, but almost that level in the 80s. They had it in the 70s, but internal divisions always tore them apart. And I think if you look at the 74 World Cup, I think that's a really telling one where they drew with Brazil, they hammered Zaire, and they beat Scotland. It qualified very impressively for the second phase. And basically, as soon as they got the bonus money at the end of the first phase, and any of the players from that squad say this, they started going out, they started drinking, they started shopping. And as soon as there's a little bit of tension there, everybody immediately rallies behind their own ethnic side. And there were just splits there. So I fear that while it's a lovely idea that Yugoslavia team would have been all-conquering, it would just have suffered from problems Yugoslavia teams had always suffered from. So it would have been great to see it, but I think it's a little simplistic to think it would have somehow overridden the ethnic problems there.
But we're just a penalty shootout away from getting to the semi-finals of the Qatar 90 against Argentina. I mean, they had a great side with Stojkovic and fantastic tournament, so surely they could have gone on and then Year 92 having got that far. That close to a semi-final like the Qatar 90.
Yeah, but if you look at Yugoslavia throughout history, they regularly got to semi-finals and finals and lost. I mean, they won 3 Olympic silvers in a row, and Yugoslavia, one of the countries who took Olympic football very seriously. I mean, the Zvezda victory in 91 is really the only time ever that a Yugoslav team took advantage of a situation they're in, and actually even they came very close to chucking it away. They won 2-1 in Munich. They go back to the second leg, and they know this is the end. They know this is the final game for them, or the final tournament for them, because the war's already started. The first missiles of the war were fired between the two legs of that game, and Siniša Mihajlović scores a free kick in the first half. They're 3-1 up on aggregate. They're cruising. They're totally in control. And suddenly they concede, and then they concede again 4 minutes later. And it's a terrible goalkeeping error that cost them the first goal. And you see the belief fade out of them. And then somehow in the last 20 minutes they pick themselves up. And it's extraordinary. I mean, if you haven't seen it on YouTube, it's really worth watching. It's the most extraordinary 20 minutes of football you'll ever see. It's like watching highlights. It's just shot after shot after shot after shot. And it really is this sort of last flailing of the Yugoslav beast. And the great thing about that team was it really was a pan-Yugoslav team. I don't think there's any Slovenians, there were no Slovenians in it, but there was, I think, 3 Montenegrins. Shavnatovic was a Bosnian Muslim, Savicevic, Montenegrin, Panchev, a Macedonian, Poznecki, a Croat. So it was a properly federal team. And that's the real beautiful thing about that side.
Philippe,
it's just that I mean the list of teams that never quite made it in a way that's almost fallacious, because if it was a great team it should have made it. But there are always examples you can think of, and there are 2 that stick in my mind. One a posteriori, which is the Hungary team of 1966. If you watch back their games in that competition, they were sublime, I think. Florian Albert, one of my heroes. And the other one, it pains me to say so, the team that was very close to become one of the great teams of all time was Arsenal in 2003-2004. That game against Chelsea at Highbury, I will never get over. Never get over. It was, but in the end they lost it 2-1. But it's a very long list that you're talking about.
We can just give a shout out to Hungary 1954 as well, and one of the
54,
everybody knows the story, but I love telling this very quick thing. But Jorge Valdano tells me that he once told me that football's about results, and that they say that you only remember the winners, and that's what matters. And it's a very Mourinho-esque view of the world. He says that's complete bollocks. Think of this was before Spain, but think of the 4 greatest World Cup teams ever, or he said 3 greatest World Cup teams ever: Hungary 54, Brazil 1970, Holland 74, and I would add in my lifetime again Brazil 82, despite the bad striker, the bad goalkeeper. of those 4 teams, only one actually won the World Cup, and that was Brazil in 1970. Hungary 54, we all remember, even though it was decades before I was born. A German team, despite the propaganda documentary and film that was made about them, and I'm sure it was great and it's fun if you're German. But for like myself, I know what really happened, and I know those guys in '54 were true greats, and I'm delighted they live on the same way. I'm delighted that the '74 Holland team lives on in people's memories.
I'd probably go for the great Hearts team under Jim Jeffries that finished second in 2005, 2006, I think, breaking up the top 2 in Scotland. Wonderful stuff there.
That was thanks to the brilliant foreign owner, by the way, who had all the Scottish media against him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So the siege mentality. We have a question from an audience member just coming very shortly. Here it is now.
As a Swansea fan, our club have had a lot of compliments over the last few seasons about the way the club's been run. And I wondered if the panel had any view on the way Queen's Park Rangers have been run, and to touch on Gab's point, whether Harry Redknapp would fall into the bracket of con man Premiership manager.
We were talking about this earlier, but perhaps as it's being broadcast, maybe we'll.
One thing you can say is that it is rather odd that if you look at the last accounts, if I'm not mistaken, they spent 91% of their turnover on wages, and that they're a perfect example for me of why there should be no transfer window in January. For me, it's an absolute moral scandal if that team survives, that it will have survived through an injection of cash in a club that is already bleeding, hemorrhaging money, that has got absolutely no viable project in itself. And if they take the place of another club which is run far better, that's all I have to say on the matter, I'm afraid.
I just to make it clear, I mean, I think Redknapp does sort of represent the cult of the manager. I think so you can also look at his record, and you look at the fact that people will point out that a lot of the clubs he's been to, with the exception of Spurs, have later had financial difficulties. But there's always an enabler. There's always an owner who does this. In the case of QPR, you have a very rich man who made a lot of money, pays a lot of taxes, employs a lot of people. I think in many ways does a lot of good, and then decides that this is what he needs to do with his team. This is what he needs to do to keep QPR up. He obviously made mistakes, but Tony Fernandes has put his own money in. And I think, that is something to be noted. There are other owners who don't quite do that and do it with smoke and mirrors, accumulating huge debts and whatnot. As for Redknapp himself, like I said, he buys and sells. If you actually sit down, I think he kind of plays a character. I had the opportunity to spend some time with him. If you talk to him about football, he actually has a certain lucidity about him. I think he knows what he's talking about. But then you look at his behavior, and you look at the way he portrays himself in the media, and the way we in the media, and I think to some degree we are guilty, the way we portray him, and he's happy to be portrayed that way, there's a very different picture out there. That said, I personally don't see how QPR is staying up this year.
There you have it. Gareth, have we got any Google Hangout comments or any tweets?
Yeah, one from, I'll get this name right, Dick_EE. Dickie says, my question is, what is the point of Stoke?
The football team, I'm guessing. Well, not the town.
He doesn't specify, but I assume he means the football team.
Okay. Jonathan, you're looking quite eager to answer this one.
I think the world of darts would be a far better place.
The home of Robbie Williams, if you will.
I won't.
Okay, all right, fine.
No, I think, it's interesting he chooses Stoke, and I presume he's saying that because of the direct style of football Stoke play. And I think it is quite an interesting question of when you have a team who's established in mid-table, what actually do they do next? And Swansea maybe are getting towards this point. And certainly, if they're in the same position in 3 or 4 years, what is the next stage? What do you do? Because you can't, you get better incrementally. The gap to the top is still enormous, and it's unbridgeable. So Stoke hang around, they stay in mid-table, maybe they get rid of Pulis and decide they want to play a different style of football, they have to enact this revolution, they risk relegation by doing that, maybe things get better, maybe they move up 2 or 3 places, maybe they qualify for the Europa League, maybe they get an attractive game against a fallen giant, like an Inter or somebody who's playing in the Europa League, and maybe they get a couple of glamorous nights in a way that Fulham did against Juventus. But that's it. That's as far as you can get. It's not like the 80s where QPR could finish second or West Ham could finish third. And I think that's, well, it's sad as the way things are.
But there's also positives here. I mean, you go to the Britannia, those guys are happy to be there. They're excited to see their club there.
But I'm not sure they are, though. I think there's an element of dissatisfaction setting in. I think that's what's interesting.
Are you sure? I mean, are they not proud? Are they not proud of the fact that they play the worst football on the planet?
Well, the thing is, I want to say this about the worst. I don't enjoy watching football play. I have a bunch of Stoke fans on Twitter who don't like me because I don't like Tony Pulis and I don't think he's a good manager. But I will give him credit for this, is that a few years ago, there's a certain sameness to football. There's a certain, if you think about, there's a certain uniformity or there's a certain convergence towards a certain style of football. And I think in England it was even more marked maybe 20 years ago, although this is the tactical man here to ask. But Stoke are doing things differently from most of the other Premier League sides. They're spending a lot of money to do it. I don't think it's an efficient way of doing it. But they are bringing a certain variety. One of my favorite managers is Denik Zeman, who does things completely different, or Marcelo Bielsa, if you prefer. You might say they're at the other end of the continuum. But I think it's good that you've got somebody here and you have somebody here, and we're trying to invent things, trying to do things differently. If you were to look at, and obviously Barcelona, of course, have their own style, but if you look at very good teams right now, what is the defining identity of Bayern Munich or of Manchester United? It's a lot more difficult. There is one, but it's a lot more difficult to pin down because it's more towards the middle, and it works for them and they execute well. So I'm frankly grateful to some degree to Stoke because they try to do things a certain way, and they bring some level of innovation in what they do.
You could also add that in the Premier League landscape, they're the pantomime villains, and that they play a role in the story. And English football is as much about script and narrative as it is about the game itself.
There we are. We had we've got a question down here. Well, wait for the mic. Here it comes. Very eager. That's what we like. Yeah, we'll chat after. There we go.
Okay, it's a question for Philippe, really. I understand you interviewed Martinez not long after he left Swansea. And you also interviewed Rodgers last season?
Yes.
So really it was a question as to how you view, from what you've seen of Swansea, if you think maybe something was different last season to the season before and with Laudrup this season, what sort of differences have you noticed in terms of how the managers approach their team and what they're expecting from them?
Well, in fairness, and I'm probably taking on the theme that's already been developed here, I haven't seen many changes. I've seen an evolution. Everybody's seen an evolution. The fact that Swansea is playing a little bit, not today, because I think they're still in post-celebration mode, honestly. They're playing slightly more directly. The number of fouls committed has increased quite spectacularly this season as well. So there's been an evolution from what Brendan Rodgers was doing here. But the philosophy of the club has been put in place. It's a continuum. And you can see all these three managers in particular being part of it and as part of a natural evolution. And it's the wisdom of the board. I mean, let's not lay too thick and say Swansea the greatest. But to have chosen three people, three very capable managers who are capable of implementing it. I haven't seen really it's a question, honestly, I don't watch Swansea every week. So it's a question really, perhaps a fan should answer better, and perhaps you have yourself, you can give your opinion about that. But I haven't seen a huge evolution in terms of the way they play or the philosophy, just a little bit quicker and a bit more direct this season, that's all.
I would ask the journalists here a question. It's something that people often wonder. They often accuse some journalists of being biased towards certain teams and so on and so forth. So, Jonathan, I'll start with you. As a journalist, can you really support the football team? You support Sunderland, so I'm guessing you're going to say yes to this question. But, would you like to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are some journalists, I think you might even be one of them, who genuinely don't support a club, which is fine. But I don't understand why, if you're somebody who's grown up in a town like Sunderland where you can't really avoid supporting Sunderland if you're interested in football, it'd be absurd to kind of come from Sunderland, like football, and not be a Sunderland fan. I don't think there's any way you can leave that at the door when you become a journalist. Obviously, you have to aim at a level of objectivity. I suspect I might probably harsher on Sunderland because I get more frustrated with them than I do with other teams. I'm more forgiving with other teams, and because I watch a lot more Sunderland than I do of other sides. I sort of know how it ought to work, and I get very frustrated when it doesn't. So I think the idea that any journalist is entirely neutral in terms of who they support is absurd. And I think it's much more honest to just declare it. And also, journalism, particularly these days in the age of blogging and things, is not just about doing the match report or writing up a press conference. There is an element of kind of, what do I feel about this? What you write about your memories or whatever. And of course, what I feel about things is influenced by being a Sunderland fan. And I'm watching games through the perspective of what will hopefully continue to be a mid-table Premier League team, or what will aspire to be a mid-table Premier League team.
Gab, you were born right by the San Siro and used to be an Inter fan, but you're no longer. You believe that you can't be a true football fan and be a journalist.
My problem is, I think if you're a fan, you have a level of emotional investment. Ultimately, I think your loyalty is simply to two things: to the club colors and to the club name. I always often make the analogy that you get a lot of people who might say, I'm Catholic, but I disagree with the Pope on this, or I'm Jewish, but I disagree with that aspect of it. I think it's a bit like that. It's being part of that community. The problem I have is that, to me, being a fan also means having a healthy dislike for your rivals and naturally giving your team and your people the benefit of the doubt until you get tired of them and you turn on them. Being in this job, having spent time with a lot of these people, you realize that some of the people you're supposed to dislike are actually really good people who do a great job and who are really good for football. And some of the people you're supposed to like are complete F-wits, that they're just bad, nasty people. So I can't claim to be totally objective. I'm more of a fan of people, of moments, and whatnot, but certainly not a club. Except when the World Cup rolls around and we get to beat Germany in a semi-final.
I'm surprised you didn't mention France in that last.
No, because we like to think about equals, yeah. So,
like in 1998 and 2000. Thank you.
Yeah. Enjoy the fact that you've won one more World Cup than Kazakhstan.
England beat both in Le Tournoi once again.
One thing I'd like to say about that, because Gab used the word or the expression club colours, and I think that's for me is the two very distinct things. I'm an Arsenal supporter for strange reasons that we don't need to go into, but I've been for a very long time, over 3 decades, and I support my club entirely, passionately, incredibly emotionally. But I've come to the point where I completely dissociate my club from my team, and I think that's the thing that you do naturally if you're a natural supporter and you're going to you report on games, and that this weird thing which happens in your mind that the team itself is just the colours. This is not really your club that you're talking about, and I would find very difficult to report on English football in particular if I didn't share that kind of experience or emotional involvement. I would find very difficult to transmit what exactly is great about the English game to the guys who read me in French or listen to me on French radio.
But I think there's also an aspect of just a professionalism, that when you go in the ground as a journalist, you're wearing your journalist hat, sometimes literally in Philippe's case.
Not tonight.
And whereas if you go as a fan, you have a different perspective. And I guess it's similar to, if you play cricket at a low level and you have to umpire for your own team, you have to sort of put your objective head on and say, well, is that LBW? Did he get a nick there? And you try and give the decision as honestly as you can. And if you don't do that, the game just doesn't work.
Except for the for the Romanian journalists. I mean, we were sitting next to each other for the Steaua Bucharest game in the Europa League, and when they scored, suddenly there was this thing happening just behind us, going absolutely apeshit. And they were the Romanian journalists going mad, bonkers.
Yeah. Actually, I'll give you an example of that from the Cup of Nations. I was in Benguela and Angola in 2010, semi-final between Egypt and Algeria, and there was me, there was Duncan White from Sun Telegraph, there was an Italian journalist, a Spanish journalist. We sort of sat in the middle of the press box, and it was the desks were taken by TV, so we were just sitting on normal seats, laptops on our knees, and the Algerians were behind us, and the Egyptians were in front of us. And Egypt won 4-0, and Algeria had 2 men sent off. And Algeria were utterly disgraceful in that game. And there's a particular Egyptian journalist who had a magnificent moustache and was very, very well turned out, probably bloke in his late 40s. And every time there was a red card or a yellow card or a chance or a goal, he would just sort of do that and adjust his cuffs, and sometimes his trouser cuffs. And I don't know what the gesture means, but it's clearly incredibly offensive. You could hear the Algerians behind getting more and more wound up. Final whistle goes, the Algerians just pile forward. So I'm sitting there kind of trying to file my copy, with people just kind of jumping over me to get involved in this fight. And I remember looking to my right, so Duncan White is massive, he's like 6'7", 6'8", and just seeing this bit of spittle flying over his shoulder, one of the Algerians from behind spitting on the Egyptians below. And then my phone goes, it's Irish radio, and I did quite a lot of work for Irish radio in those days. And they said, can we come to you in 10 minutes? Come to me now, there's a fight going on in the press box. So I couldn't hear them because the noise was so loud. So I was just describing the fight. I was saying, I love a good brawl. And this was a great brawl. I was sort of right at the back of. And riot police had to come in to break it up. It was absolutely extraordinary. So, yeah, that level of commitment maybe is over the top.
So if I just, I know, slightly more, that funny story down, it's slightly more serious note. I do think the issue of bias is a serious one with the media, bias and influence. I don't think it's necessarily down to who you support, but the reality of, especially those of us who are part of the mainstream media, is you're constantly being played and influenced by the people you cover, who will give you access, they'll tell you things and so on, and they expect loyalty. Somebody's nice to you, and then you say, so-and-so had a bad game. It's happened to me, I'm assuming it's happened to all of us. They'll come back and be like, well, that's unfair, I thought you were my friend, and whatever else. And sometimes it's a very difficult thing to navigate. And I think in some cases with the media, there's a few cases I obviously won't name, where I think it reaches an entirely unhealthy level, where it's basically collusion, where you basically become a cheerleader in exchange for huge access to certain people.
Why so serious, Gab? We've got time for one, maybe two more questions. Man with the beard, right there. Here comes the microphone.
Guy next to him also has a beard, by the way. If you picked up on that.
Oh no, that's the full beard. That is. He knows. He knows.
Right, I'm aware that I'm asking this in Swansea, so I'll say it very delicately. You say that your loyalty is to the club name and the club colours. What happens if they both change?
Ah, yes, of course. Yeah, Cardiff City fans know all about that. Jonathan.
I don't know how Cardiff fans have put up with it. I mean, if somebody took over Sunderland and said, right, as of now we're known
black and white.
We're wearing black and white and we're known as the Sunderland Magpies, I would find that a very difficult team to support. I'm not really sure what you can do about it. I guess you stage protests and I don't know. Change of colours, up to a point I can accept, and I guess we accept it with away kits all the time.
And Jonathan, if I might jump in for that, but very often things which are thought to be change of colours are actually not change of colours. That club was using those colours 50 or 60 years ago.
Yeah, but
forgotten about that.
But that is still a change to what you and your father and your father's father have known.
But what if the colours are lucky in the Far East?
If you put it like that,
yeah.
I didn't realise the size.
Like which ones?
Red, I believe. That's Cardiff.
Well, we're already wearing red. It's not a problem, is it?
Yeah. Well, that's very true. That's very true. So not a problem at all. Is the answer there? A question from the man with the green hood. Yeah, you. Sorry, I don't know. Is it green?
Yeah, it's green.
This question is mainly for Philippe. To what extent would you attribute Arsenal's recent regression to Arsene Wenger? And do you believe he should bear the brunt of the recent criticisms despite the club's wage policy, which isn't within his remit?
Yes, very good question. I will direct you to the 6-page piece I wrote on the subject for France Football last week.
Well, we've not got too long, so don't.
Exactly, which is why that was my answer.
More importantly, does he speak French? Do you read French? Do you subscribe to France Football? No. So tell him.
Very good reason. Very good.
Yes, of course.
No, clearly, what I would say is that the situation, the problem is with the club as much as it is with the team. which would seem to exonerate Arsene Wenger if you say that. But that's not my opinion. My opinion is that there is almost a collusion of interest between the manager and his board, or his non-existent board, which means that the club has reached a stasis, which is very unhealthy, in which there is literally no way forward. The club is really stuck in a rut in economic terms, where it's not going so well. If you take out the real estate operations and the sale of players, you realize that Arsenal has actually made the loss over the last exercise. And Arsene Wenger, you really have the feeling you're coming to the end of an era, really. You feel that the club is exhausted, the fans are exhausted, everybody's exhausted. There is an ownership situation which is completely locked at the moment, which is killing everybody within the club. And if you talk to anyone who is associated with the club, and this is a personal opinion, this is not the journalist, this is the gunner speaking here, we're waiting for something to unblock the situation. And we know it's going to be hard, but that the time might have come to say goodbye to Arsene.
Philippe, you say that, okay?
Yeah.
I'm a passionate Gooner as well. Okay? When you compare us to everybody else above us, they're all owned by multi-millionaires who are going.
Aren't we? Isn't Stan Kroenke a multimillionaire?
Not solely. No, not solely. We aren't at the quest of one man. And I watched Chelsea last Sunday, and when Abramovich pulls the money out, it'll all end in tears.
Okay, well, sorry, the microphone wasn't on you there, so that was a question about the clubs above Arsenal are owned by billionaires and whatnot.
Well, which I was answering. Stan Kroenke is also a billionaire. And
he's married to somebody who could probably buy, if not Abramovich, the Glazers for breakfast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Walmart. Put them in a cage.
Walmart. And I mean, it's the whole ownership model of Arsenal has come unstuck after the death of Danny Fiszman and the sale of David Dean's shares to Red and White Holdings. We all know that. And which is, I mean, it's such a long question to answer. I mean, we can talk about it at the bar later on. I think
that's probably a better idea. We've got time for one more Twitter question.
Okay, possibly going back to the whether you can be a journalist and a fan thing. When was the last time any of the panellists completely lost it over a game of football?
Or a moment in football.
Or a moment in football.
I'll let you go first.
Okay, Jonathan,
Me?
you go first.
Well, it depends what you mean by lose. If you mean lose it in terms of anger or temper, I think it's defeat. It's Sunderland defeat Sheffield United in 1991.
That's 20.
No one's going to contest that.
Years
ago. Nice and snappy.
Ian Bryson scored to make it 1-0 for Sheffield United. We were absolutely robbed in that game. I was furious. But in terms of just emotionally losing, I think that, I've already referred to the Zambia victory over Ivory Coast last year in the final. Anybody who'd spent any time with that Zambian team, I'd been with them from before the semi-final onwards. To see Kalisha Bwalia, who was part of that team in '93, but wasn't on the plane because he was playing in the Netherlands, so was flying from a different place. To see him standing on the touchline, having put that team back together as the president of the FA, and he after the semi-final, we spoke to him in the mix zone after the game, and he gave us an extraordinary interview in which he said that we cannot lose in the final because it won't just be 11 players out there; there'll be 11 ghosts as well. And you hear him say that he has on your neck stand up, and to be in the stadium when they win it, to see them in a big prayer session at the end, and to see Eve Renard carrying the fullback Musonda onto the pitch. I don't know if you remember, he got injured early on, and he'd done his ankle, and Eve Renard in his great white kind of flouncy shirt, like
beautiful
Mills and Boone hero, kind of carrying a stricken player to join the celebrations. If you didn't feel a lump in your throat seeing that, then you're probably not alive.
Yeah, Gab, you got a better answer than that?
I do not have a better answer. It's not from my journalism days, but I did write about it at length in Blizzard 4 or 5, I think it was. But no, it wasn't 2. Was it? 2. Sorry, there you go. 1990 World Cup was kind of like my last World Cup as a fan. Italy, everything was set up for Italy to win the World Cup. Except for with the bright idea of switching the semi-final to Naples, and we had the bright idea of not accounting for Mr. Maradona knocking Yugoslavia out. And you found yourself in this bizarre game that we should have won by a handsome margin, but we were playing against somebody not human on the day who managed to rally the powers and bewitch the audience. So it was like playing an away game, and then it got to the penalty kicks, and for some bizarre reason they all decided to, every single Italian player put the kick to the left of Goicoechea.
You're really reliving this,
same way, every way, and I was sick and I didn't speak for 2 days, and yeah, it was not good. And then after that, I'd like to think I've added some level of perspective. In fact, I might add that that's probably why I became a journalist, so that I could have that level of distance and objectivity, because if I'd remained a fan, I probably would have been institutionalized by now.
And if you want to read 13,000 words on Gab's breakdown of Spurs DC 2, you can get the back issues to the website. Thank you.
Philippe, very quickly before we finish.
The last time, because those guys are, not Jonathan, but this is actually very recent. The last time I completely lost it in the press box was when Thierry Henry scored against Leeds in the FA Cup.
Oh yes, of course.
I really lost it, and I think everybody around me lost it at that time.
Yeah.
It was a very beautiful moment.
Brilliant stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this Blizzard Q&A. A big round of applause to the panel. Absolutely. Still going. Philippe, Auclair, Jonathan Wilson, Gabriele Marcotti, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. It's been wonderful to have you here. Thank you to the Dylan Thomas Centre, of course, and Google Plus with the Google Hangout. It's been great to be broadcast around the world. So safe journey home. Thank you very much. There are books at the back, The Outsider, The History of Goalkeeper, and I thoroughly recommend that by Jonathan Wilson.
What about the others?
And there's a lot of others there. Don't you worry about that. But book signings, a chat. And make sure if you haven't, then do check out the Blizzard as well. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.